Hello and welcome to the Football Show. Myself, Shane Stapleton, Declan Bogue as ever, and delighted to say we're joined by Pillar Caffrey, former Dublin manager. How are you doing, man?
All good, all good.
Good stuff, Pillar. Just first question for you, Pillar. We haven't spoken to you in a while. Have you enjoyed the Football League so far?
Strangely, yes. Even though it's weird with no supporters for the first few rounds. It was great to see the Northern games last week with a few supporters. It just changes the whole dynamic of watching a game. But no, the football has been amazing. We seem to be in a new era of attacking football where teams are trying to outscore each other as opposed to try and keep the score lines down. So yeah, it's been very different and hugely enjoyable. And
then from a Dublin point of view, have you noticed much of an evolution of Dublin? Do you think they're just ticking along the same old way?
Yeah, look, there's a quite evolution going on. I don't know whether it's forced or not in terms of, Desi is obviously going to put his own stamp on it. Last year was a short campaign. And then with a few retirees and there's a few players we haven't seen this year at all. So a lot of bodies, new faces are coming in. I'd be slightly concerned that the backup that's coming through, since Con O'Callaghan, his era, like Brian Howard, Owen Murch and Con came off the 121 team. There's not really much more coming after that, close to the standard. I think maybe the marquee years might be drying up a little bit. Paddy Small is the only one that I can think of offhand that's actually putting his hand up for a starting team. And Brian Howard and Con and these lads, these are all 25 now. So we have had good under 21 teams, but not many of them are actually stepping up to the plate in terms of going to be able to force their way into this first team. And maybe that's being selfish, but it's slightly worrying going forward.
Yeah, would you go along those lines, Declan?
We've talked. Sorry, hello, Pillar. Sorry, I never actually said hello here at the start of the show, but we had talked about this slightly before in terms of Dublin and I suppose in some ways an awful lot of the rest of the country are always kind of searching almost optimistically for signs of slippage, and we kind of talked about how Paul Mannion's not going to be there, Jack McCaffrey, and how the overall standard, especially with the of retirees. I know Birder's gone a couple of years now, but Michael Macaulay and so on, that lack of kind of bite in the having training maybe filters down. And that's an interesting one. I know that you remember hearing about, I think it was the lad, Pillar, that from Tyrone that slipped into the Dublin panel for a while as a sleeper agent.
Paddy Quinn.
Paddy Quinn, and he gave interviews to everybody and told everybody exactly how Dublin operated. But in that, he talked about the Dublin depth chart, that Jim Gavin showed them. Here is the top 100 footballers in Dublin or whatever, and what sort of things that he had them all doing. So, if there was another grade down, these boys were being prepared then to make a step up to the grade on up from them. But I'd wonder now if he was to compile that depth chart, where he'd be, or if he would see significant signs of slippage himself. Just finding it interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Obviously, Kieran Archer's coming through, but it's not the big wave that we have seen before.
Well, young Archer, he had, a fabulous 20 campaign or whatever, but as far as I'm aware, he's not even on the radar with them.
Nice.
So maybe he was one of these guys that it just suited him with that team, and he scored heavily for them. But there is quite a difference from the under 20 grade to stepping up to the senior, and that team got to an All-Ireland final, and yet we don't see any of them lads stepping up to the plate in terms of given game time. And in fairness to Desi, he would know exactly what's out there. That they would be doing the trawl. I know they do have an extended panel, and after league games, there'll be a run out the next day between the people who didn't get on and the extended squad or whatever. But the fear is that, look, Aaron Byrne is he got a great goal the last day out. Now he would be a club man of ours, Nafina, again, but he was on that team that won the All-Ireland with Con. So like it's taken him a long time to get his foot in the door and get the trust to actually come in. You know, he's been getting bits and pieces of games, and he was brilliant on that 21 team as a wing forward. But again, does he have what it takes to step up and command the place on the senior squad now? It remains to be seen. So I would definitely think, look, the glory years of us producing 2 and 3 players and them being of the highest level that we didn't have back in the day when I was manager. The caliber of players that have come through for Dublin over the last 8 years have been just phenomenal. But I definitely would see that while the club game is still very strong in Dublin, Tom Gray has obviously done a very good job with the 20s, and he's still there again this year. I just don't know of the next superstar that's coming.
Can I just reflect on the Dublin? I mean, we know that the league semi-finals are coming this weekend. Tyrone Kerry, that's a big one, of course, and Donegal, Dublin as well. There's plenty of other games going on, which we'll get to in a while. But just to reflect on Dublin's match with Kerry a couple of weeks back, I'm not sure how much of it you saw, Pillar. I'm sure you did watch it. I was down at it, and when Kerry went 7 points behind at the start of the second half, and Dublin were able to hold on to the ball for I think 4 minutes there was an injury in there, but Kerry couldn't get their hands on the ball. I was kind of wondering about the future of this season. What do you put down the rest of that game and Kerry's comeback to? Do you put it down to Dublin taking their foot off the gas? Kerry, more pressing higher up the field? What do you put that down to? And does it bother you?
Yeah, it was a weird watch, fantastically enjoyable, but it was like watching a car crash happening, because you just felt with Kerry that they were capable of conceding goals at nearly every second attack, and they had actually no answers in terms of one-on-one defending. And you're sort of saying, like, for all the firepower that we know Kerry have and the brilliance they can play going forward, they're still struggling, to have an Aidan O'Mahony or a Mark O'Shea or somebody that can step up and do a really good man-marking job. And as long as that remains, I think it's going to take a massive overall performance for them to beat Dublin on any given day, because they're still look capable of conceding soft goals. You would say that, you would think that other contenders would have a better defence than Kerry, while I think probably Kerry have the best forward attacking unit, probably even stronger than Dublin's at the moment. So it was a weird watch. I with my thinking hat on, I do think these two teams, they obviously can't meet in the league final, because Kerry won't. If Kerry win and Dublin win, that final won't take place. But I would expect them to probably meet later, as in an All-Ireland final in August. But it's slightly worrying from Dublin's point of view as well, in that, look, they probably didn't deserve to get a draw in the end with Kerry's comeback. And I think the more Kerry play Dublin, the more they're going to believe that, they are actually capable of taking Dublin. They just need to get things, better in the defensive end of the field. And it'll probably be enough to get them over the line. But there's still a lot of ifs.
Yeah, how do you think Desi and Dublin have dealt with, the COVID situation and the fact that they broke the training bans and all that? It kind of feels like it's a little bit forgotten at this point. Mick Galvin is doing the interviews or whatever, and it just seems to be, just business as usual.
Yeah, look, every manager that's ever served suspension will tell you, the honest truth is you're still heavily involved. Desi would still be viewing, whether it's by remote camera or whatever. He'd still, it's he's making every decision really. Making himself would be very tight over a long number of years. So there would be no issue in terms of carrying on. It obviously is slightly off-putting, but Dublin on match day, it really is. It's like a machine now that senior players, they'd nearly be running the dressing room. You know what I mean? That there's no big motivational speeches made in Dublin dressing rooms anymore, or any stuff like that. It's all, the prep is all done beforehand, and it's rolled out. There's an expectation to the level of performance on a given day, and I think the players would very much take ownership of that. And like Desi will be back from whatever the 1st of July, which is only a couple of weeks away. So I would think, look, it was embarrassing. I think it was dealt with, and they've moved on quickly, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, Declan, I'm sure if you want to jump in there.
Well, I just wonder, what Desi's, Pillar, you tell me what the difficulty was for Desi coming through. Like, obviously, him a lifetime, and come and take that job. I don't know if he would have maybe just nudged you in the elbow and said, well, what do you think of this running? But I mean, it was such a thankless job to take on in the first place, given the success that Jim had. But is that the perfect time to take on a team when they just seem so well oiled?
Yeah, look, I've two players I ever had in my dressing room that I always knew would be destined for management roles were Desi Farrell and Kieran McGeaney. Geezer played with us for 10 years in the Fianna, and I managed them for 3 or 4 of them years. And himself and Desi were just, people talk about natural leaders or whatever, but A, they were so easy to manage, and B, they craved the leadership roles within that team, and you just knew that both of them were destined to go on and become managers, and most likely become great managers. Desi, there was never going to be another time for Desi to take over this team. He put in the groundwork with the 21s, and nobody expected Jim to step away. But I remember that day in Croke Park looking down on the pitch, and it was different with Jim. He did seem to be saying goodbye. He was never a man for the highlights or the headlines post-match, something like that. But that day he brought his father down onto the pitch, and they walked the pitch. And I just felt, yeah, look, maybe there is something happening here, that Jim is going to step away. And I always felt, look, there was only one candidate, and it was Desi Farrell. Was it a perfect time? Look, the team was still growing at that stage in terms of the retirements that were going to come and the age profile. Of course, this can't keep continuing, and it's unrealistic even for Dublin, the greatest Dublin sports, to think that, yeah, this is going to roll on to 7, 8, 9, 10. It's not. I've been saying it for a while. This team will age, retirements will happen. And I would think if you look back 3 years, it was a much, much stronger Dublin panel than it is now. So I think, look, Desi will try and eke every last ounce out of this group. He knows what's coming behind, and while, look, people within the camp will say, yeah, look, Dublin are still a machine and still producing it. I think those of us that know the club scene and know the strength of these guys that are coming behind, I would say, look, we are falling from A+ players down to B and C type players that they will have to really play above themselves, as opposed to guys like Con and Brian Howard and Owen Merchant and these fellas just slipping in and being able to make huge impacts on All-Ireland final day, never mind forced their way into squads. So it was always going to be Desi Farrell. He was never going to step back and say, no, I'll wait 2 or 3 years. No, he would have a great relationship with McGalvin, who would be very knowledgeable of the whole scene and would be highly thought of. And then he kept on board Shane O'Hanlon for, Shane provided great continuity in terms of the know-how and what was. So he's kept quite a few of the backroom team on board. So not that much would have changed for the players. And plus, an awful lot of the players that are there now would have played underage through Desi. So, they would know Desi's mantra and, Desi's style. He hasn't changed things up very much. Bar he is trying to find, the next 4 or 5 players who are going to boost the squad. So that remains, a work in progress to see actually, look, how many of these Padder O'Coffeys or Aaron Burns or Pascals or whatever can actually come in and say, yeah, I am actually going to take a starting place on this 15 and I'm going to make a difference.
A question I'd ask you, Pillar, is, having managed an inter-county team, you have this balance of like young players in the squad and then experienced players in the squad and everyone in between. So a lot of the players who have won Footballer of the Year, Bernard Brogan's gone, Michael Darmacaulay's gone, Padder Andrews, another great player, and there's a few more that I haven't even listed there. But like, if you have players that are no longer starting, they're probably, and they're an experienced player and they've done it before, they're probably more likely to come to the manager and say, hey, why aren't I getting a go here? But, you might want to move on from those players in some ways because you're like, they're not the same player of old. And I'm not necessarily meaning those players that I've already mentioned. But there's some value in a training match when you have them there. And let's say these younger players like Peadar O'Cofaigh Byrne and Sean McMahon, who's in there getting game time and all that. Where's that balance between keeping the experienced players but not having them get to a stage where they're frustrated and actually nearly even spoiling the scenario because you can kind of almost sense their anger when they walk into the room? Is it a tough balance managing a panel that way?
It is, because look, let's be realistic about it. Everybody wants to play. I think Jim probably perfected it in terms of, our line used to be when we were coaching and managing. Look, you start with your best team and you see how far it gets you, and then you bring your subs, hoping they can keep the standard up. Where Jim would have flipping that and saying he wanted to finish games with his best team on the pitch. So that was giving you a better chance of buying in relation to being in the 20. That was going to play in the match day. But look, there's a few players this year that's quite strange in terms of we haven't seen them yet. Whether they're going to still be involved in the championship going forward, we'll have to see. Kevin McMenamin, obviously Stephen Cluxton, Keane O'Sullivan, Philly McMahon has got a couple of minutes or whatever, but these are senior guys. Obviously, Cluxton is the game changer. Desi has tried the other two keepers, and look, there is going to be a drop in standard once Cluxton goes. Let's hope that he is still going to be involved this year, but we haven't seen him to date. You take Philly McMahon and Keane O'Sullivan out of that defence, and they are getting on, and the experience that they've brought, the match day expertise they brought to certain situations, the calmness they've brought. You're not replacing that with a like in terms of some of these other guys that are coming through, and the same up front. Paddy Andrews was a great servant to Dublin. Kevin Mack, sure, we can put down several of our All-Irelands to him alone. He broke Kerry's heart on his own back several times. So that big day match impact, while it's still around the dressing room, I don't know how much is left in them guys. And them guys usually decide for themselves. Like the season last year and this year are shortened seasons, so it's probably easier to get a buy-in from them hanging around. But I think after this year you'll see another clean sweep of guys. Hopefully next year that we go back to having a proper season with crowds in, and it'll mean a longer season for guys. Where this year, look, obviously guys were tipping away doing their own thing, and it's a short block of games in the National League and even the Championship. Like if you're in the Dublin dressing room, you're saying, right, let's gear ourselves for Bank Holiday weekend, August, Leinster final, 2 weeks later an All-Ireland semi-final, and then hopefully an All-Ireland final. So it's a month that you really have to say, yeah, if Desi can get everything in a row for that month and hang on to as many of these guys to make up his 20 match day squad that's going to be used or whatever, they're still going to be the team to beat.
Pillar, it's a question I have for you, and it's just something that you see in Bernard Brogan's book, his autobiography, about the process, if you want to call it that, of like Dublin at half time in games. And under Jim Gavin, the defence, the midfield, goalkeeper and defence, midfield and forwards all split up into their own groups with other people too hanging around that group and sort of teasing out the problems or issues they might have had or what they're doing well, with a member of the backroom team or Jim or Jason Sherlock or whoever floating in the background, maybe suggesting the odd stat that would back up the sort of consensus they were coming to. How far removed or how similar was that to when you yourself were in charge?
Yeah, look, I would have having, fellas like Ski Wade, Kieran Duff, so we actually that's the way we would address things, especially when we were in Croke Park. It would be a case of back in dressing room at half time, defence, goalkeeper, and maybe one of the midfielders, plus any of the sub defenders, they would have gone to a little group and teasing out who's causing the problems. Do we need to switch around anything? And so you would have gotten the eyes of the stats man might throw a few things that needed to be covered. Ray Byrne, and then I would be just hovering between the two groups, having an overview, and maybe cherry picking what I thought were the 2 or 3 points that needed to be given to the whole group. So, that process was there in place from back in my day. That's the way we were approaching it. It was like separate entities, and you would encourage the players if they felt there was something needed to be said that they were seeing themselves. Don't wait till after the match to say it. Throw it out on the table and we'll address it or whatever. So no, you had several eyes looking on it. A couple of leaders would say stuff within the group, and maybe 1 or 2 of my management team, and that'd be it. But it was just that was an evolving process all the time.
So I mean, in that light, right? And I mean, it's a tricky one to frame this question, but like sometimes when it's talked about the Dublin success and the juggernaut and everything that's so highly professional, do you ever get a sense that what you did as a management team, as a group, with the like of Ski and Kieran Duff, and that is in some way held up as, well, that was all wrong, and then everything then became all right? And I say that with respect, because it might sound like, but I'm just talking the overall narrative that you see sometimes is that Dublin, even there was a book written about how Dublin got it so wrong for so long. Do you take the question in the spirit it's intended?
Look, I know exactly what you're getting at. And the bottom line is you have to be realistic. Pat Gilroy broke the mold in terms of, okay, under my tenure, I felt we improved. We sort of nailed down winning Leinster titles, albeit they were fairly tight. But we won for the 4 years that I was there. But we were a yard short when it came to taking on Tyrone or Kerry. Now Mayo did us 1 year as well, and that would have been the real disappointing one, because again we were 7 points up in that second half, and a brilliant Mayo performance overturned us. And I remember being at that All-Ireland final and watching Mayo concede 3 early goals and saying, well, maybe we weren't ready to take on that great Kerry team neither. So I would never look back on and regret or whatever. I would say, look, Pat Gilroy broke the mould, and that he got them over the line in 2011. He'd failure before that, and he'd failure after that, and then Jim came in and the perfect storm in terms of what he added to it. They only lost once under Jim, and the players that came through the system just added multiples percentages each year in terms of improving them, and look, they were the best years we've ever seen for the Dublin team. So I don't look back at it and feel guilty or feel ashamed or feel nothing like that. That we knew we were getting closer, and we knew the work that we were putting in was quality, and of course, at the end result, we didn't win All-Ireland. So if you're talking about in terms of All-Ireland, we go down as a failure. But I would like to think that, look, there was maybe some strong foundations put in place during them couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's something that. Sorry to jump in just 1 second, Declan. Davy Fitzgerald gets a lot of credit for the Leinster title that Wexford won in 2017, and rightly so. Obviously, he got them there. But, it's probably overlooked the job that Liam Dunn had done for a couple of years before that in putting in a lot of the groundwork. Because I remember chatting to one of the players, I think it was Owen Quigley, and he had talked about how the body fat percentage when they'd started out in year one under Liam Dunn was up here, and then obviously it dropped down as years went on. So all that stuff is crucial too. So certainly there's a point in that. Declan, sorry, I cut in ahead of you there.
No, it was just I just wanted to ask. I know, look, it's not hokey stuff really, but it's been covered. Pillar, you've talked about this before, but John Morrison I just loved spending time with John Morrison and would have had many long conversations with coaching and stuff like that. And obviously, like, you and him had the relationship, and people mightn't have been aware of that when Mayo were warming up on the hill in 06. But I mean, how long did it take you? Was it after the game then that you were able to have a conversation with John and sort of obviously then you'd been maybe smarting after that game in particular, but just to come to terms with the fact that they kind of pulled a wee bit of a trick there?
Yeah, look, he's one of the good guys, or was one of the good guys in GA circles. I actually loved his company, as you rightly say, Declan. He was way ahead of the pack in terms of his thinking. I actually brought him to Nafina on several occasions, given coaching courses, sharing his expertise to all our coaches, and I found him a fascinating guy. So, look, what happened. It was a spur of the moment thing. There was never any, he was in our house. He had breakfast. He'd know all my kids. So no, look, it was just one of those things. And in fairness to him, I still don't believe, having looked at the reaction of Mickey Morden, that was planned by management. I think the players, Mayo players themselves, took ownership of that in whatever brief spell that they decided, just getting the team photograph to head down to the hill end and it. So, there's been a lot written and said about it, but no, there wasn't certainly. I admired John Morrison before the game and after that game, and there was no falling out or anything like that over it.
Yeah, but David Brady, I think, has talked about that before, that it was basically a player snap decision really made by the players. There's one more thing I wanted to ask you. This is sort of a more a cerebral kind of thing, but I don't know if you're keen on nostalgia or looking back over that period where you were, but I'd just be interested in your thoughts on the style of football, because you say about the Tyrone, Kerry, Dublin, Mayo that were pushing it all on at that time. And I suppose at the start of the last year's lockdown, our sport were showing a lot of the games from that era. 06 game, even the like of, say, Tyrone Armagh from 05, which was just off the charts with intensity and stuff like that. Would you have been more inclined to maybe watch one of those games or the modern day games, or do you think there is a huge amount of disparity between the two?
Yeah, look, the game has changed as it does in every decade or whatever, but I actually thought it was a special time, and I look back, with the players that we had, and at times I think we did very well with the group of players we had. We'd one really marquee forward during that era, and that was Alan Brogan, and he there was lots of games that he was carrying us himself. The defending and the one-on-one situations that were happening in them games, the intensity that Armagh and Tyrone were bringing to the table every time you played, it was just phenomenal. And I think, it was a very exciting area when you look back on them games. The skill level is there, but there was brilliant defending. I not have to put it out there, I'm not a mad fan of the way the game evolved. We'll say since Jimmy McGuinness took it to a new level with Donegal. I found that nearly a turn off for a number of years, and then to see it creep into club level and even underage level. I remember watching Nafina playing Bridget's team, Mickey Mouse under 15 B game or something was on a back pitch in Nafina. I went down to watch it. And the Bridget's team lined up, and they actually lined up with two extra defenders. And the referee looked around and said, "What's going on here?" And they said, "That's the way we're playing." He said, No. Put your players in proper positions before I throw the ball in. And I thought, if this was an under 15 B game on a back pitch, I said, what are we doing? Like, there was very little enjoyment for forwards during that area when they were, every time they got a ball, they had to turn back ways to pass it sideways or back ways or start off. So visually, I thought, no, that wasn't for me. I enjoyed their era, and I do agree with you. some of them Tyrone Armagh games were just off the charts. You look forward to them. They weren't high-scoring games, but the actual the skill level of the defending that was going on in them games was just a sight to behold. And like both squads took it to a different level without going into this blanket defence where fellas just didn't leave. Or after kick out, number 10 and number 12 just ran straight back into the half-back line, and when the half-back line dropped in front, and it just became so boring to watch. Whereas now, look, the last few weeks, everybody's talking about, Conor Callan and David Clifford being so exciting. You've Shane Walsh with Galway. You've these marquee players that you're just, Armagh, a few coming through. You're just excited to see them get on the ball, and they don't have to be 3 men to get a score.
Actually, Declan, Jim McGuinness was talking about how he was in the media last week, and he was almost equating the Donegal team then with the Dublin team now. I mean, I might be doing a slight disservice there, but he did say that Dublin are the most defensive team in football, and he accepted that would be the headline afterwards. But Donegal now, after coming through the Division 1 North side of things, undefeated really after games with Tyrone, Armagh and Monaghan, 1 win and 2 draws. They're a very different team these days. To me, they're an exciting team to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Really excited the way they're set up. Really excited watching them playing. And I just hope that, look, we're only a few weeks away from the championship start. And I just hope teams don't flip the coin now and go back up to the defensive. Because up and down the leagues, the score lines have been fantastic. Seeing the highlights of teams. And for players themselves, you know what I mean? Like, I have 3 lads that were playing at club level, and during that phase, we saying to me, and the 3 of them were forwards, pain in the arse going out, and all of a sudden you're facing a team that's playing 10 defenders, and matches just become so sterile. So no, look, we're in a good place with our game at the moment, and my hope is that, look, this rolls into the championship. I think it will, personally, because it's one hit and you're out. I don't think teams can flick a coin from league to championship. There's not enough time even. But look, Jimmy McGuinness, I think he was just shooting the breeze coming out with a comment like that. I don't think there's one person that would agree with him. Of course, Dublin, when they have to defend, have defended brilliantly. But don't tell me that Dublin haven't been exciting to watch during this era of winning these All Irelands. There's not an All Ireland semi-final or final that I wouldn't sit back and enjoy and watch.
Yeah. Will it though, Pillar? Will it all come down to, in the end, the most basic fundamentals of Gaelic football that the management have been looking at from the 60s is, okay, you identify your markups, and then you're gonna, if you have an asset like, I say, Hugh McFadden in midfield, in any big game, he just plays it deep. He just lays in between the half-back line and full-back line. He's just a deep-lying midfielder. It's not so much a sweeper anymore, like a Mark McHugh type, but a more mobile midfielder, like a Colm Kavanagh, who will occasionally get forward, but then also sort of attend back. Has it evolved to that point where you're not like your St. Bridget's B team, where you have two lads who are identified as sweepers, but it's a more fluid thing? And I mean, when you look at Dublin defending, they just simply, there's nobody ahead of the ball when they are defending. Like, yes, they like to push and press up the top, and while the other team works it back, they make it difficult. They don't all retreat. But I mean, is this the way it's going now? Do you think, like with Dublin and Donegal, it's just more fluid? Lads will fill in different roles as needed.
Yeah, and look, I think that's the beauty about the way the game is evolving. And naturally, that while we in Dublin look at Conor Callan has been such an exciting goal scoring threat every time he's on the ball offensively. If he gets you 1-on-1, I don't think there's a defender in Ireland that will stop him. But if Dublin are under a sustained period of pressure, there's every chance you see Conor Callan inside 30-metre line, putting a press on somebody, having chased back. Paul Mannion, when he was around, was the exact same. He could be brilliant taking on somebody into the hill end, and 30 seconds later you could see him chasing back, trying to dispossess somebody. So there's a naturalness about the way the game flows without having specified guys. Like you look at Niall Scully, who's become an unsung hero in the Dublin squad in terms of, you know, the amount of ground he tracks, the amount of ball that he's carrying, and his decision making on the ball has improved so much. And you will see him a lot in the defensive side of Dublin's performance. But like you'll also see him delivering in balls, like he gave in to Con for that goal that got Paul Murphy out with. He gets on the end of moves himself. He creates a lot of goals scored and chances by his ball carrying. So there is a natural fluidity to the game that wasn't there previously, or players were told, look, you don't go across the halfway line with the ball. You pass it off to somebody else. Where, you know, nowadays, you know, and Kerry, in fairness to them, maybe it's part of their downfall, but like they are putting together a very exciting, you know, wing backs. Gavin White is a beautiful carrier of the ball. Paul Murphy the same, you know what I mean? But it's a matter of, look, can teams get the balance? But that very much does go into it. Like, you know, you take McFadden or McBrearty now, this, you know, Dublin will have worked out who's taken him. You know, he has taken Dublin defenders to the cleaners previously in games. He's a guy that has scored very heavily against Dublin. So it'll be interesting to see who's given the first job of man marking him to try and nullify his impact on the game.
Pillar, you've been very good with your time. Just maybe one more question before we let you go, if you don't mind. Just from, you know, the other competitors out there, Kerry, Mayo, Donegal, who do you think is most likely if it's not going to be Dublin this year? And obviously Tyrone, and there might be a few more teams that you're thinking of.
Yeah, look, again, Ulster, like they're going to have to dug it out. You know, they're going to have to be on their game up there from the preliminary round if somebody wants to get through. So, you know, we often laughed about it down in Leinster and said, whoever comes out is going to be half dead up there by the time they get to Croke Park. And the same thing will happen this year. You know, Armagh are in the picture as well. They've performed well in the league, and they're going to have an impact on their side of the draw. So, you know, Connacht, I don't know what you can read into Connacht. You know, I still think probably Mayo will come out there. You know, I can't see anybody touching Dublin and Leinster. So you're looking at Mayo, Dublin, All-Ireland semi-final. Again, I still think it'll take a major improvement in Mayo to knock Dublin out of semi-final stage. And look, I think Kerry, they're not going to get caught in Munster this year. And you know, Tyrone are the ones probably have the most room for improvement. You know, we've seen Michael Murphy now breaking down with a hamstring injury, so that's a cause for concern with Donegal. And obviously a Donegal team, less Michael Murphy, won't be the same animal. So I would think, look, I think Tyrone might come out of Ulster. And then, you know, could they take Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final? We'll see. You know, if you put me head in the block, I'd say it's going to be Dublin Kerry final.
And that'll be an exciting one to look forward to. Pillar, you've been really good with your time. Really appreciate you joining us.
That's brilliant.
Cheers. Enjoy the chat, lads. Enjoy the chat. See you.
See ya. So that was Paul Pillar Caffrey, former Dublin manager. Brilliant stuff out of him. If you have any comments on the back of that, get those in and we can display them up on the screen and chat about them. Yeah, always great to chat to him, isn't it, Declan?
To be honest, I've never spoken to him before.
Oh, have you not?
No, but he's very, probably came along a wee bit after professional, anyway, like just after his era, but his insights into how they conducted the halftime analysis among themselves in the dressing room was quite something there. I mean, that I was being respectful and trying to frame the question that wouldn't cause offense, but like sometimes when you are reading the narrative or reading columnists and that, it's very easy to characterize his period in charge of Dublin as just some kind of I think almost they're put in the same box as Donegal pre Jim McGuinness. Is why could they not get this right? Like, I mean, oh my God, it's so simple. Even the book, and I can't for the life of me think of it, and I know it's upstairs and where it is, about how Dublin got it so wrong for so long, by Neil something. God, forgive me for forgetting the title of it, but you know,
was it Neil Cotter?
The Witch.
the chaos years. Neil Cotter.
Even to call it a name like the chaos years, like, you know, I mean, going back to is it Tommy Lyons' time, and, you know, Tommy Lyons, if I'm not wrong, gave Stephen Cluxton his debut, and Pillar, you know, brought along that generations of players that then became something very different, like obviously the Bernard Brogans and all those guys. And it's kind of, it's like you said about Liam Dunn, like Davy Fitz comes in and gets the credit. Yes, of course, same in a lot of ways as Art McCrory. Art McCrory and Eugene McKenna were the joint managers of Tyrone, and lost to Sligo. Mickey Hart comes in and he's hailed as a genius and so on because they win the All-Ireland. But, you know, there was boys that didn't actually play in those underage minor and under-21 teams for Mickey, such as Conor Gormley. Ricey was not a fashionable teenager in any way. But you know what I mean? Like he actually, you know, made his Tyrone debut before he was playing for under-21s. He never played underage for Tyrone. Why I'm saying that is, you know, the work that the like of Pillar does, even just implementing that culture where the backs, midfields and forwards all go off into their own and review a first half and you know, say, how can we get this right for the second half? You know, when you read that in Bernard Brogan's book, I'm completely blown away and saying, wow, look at the level of analysis that the players are able to actually conduct. Because a lot of the time players, because they're in the heat of the battle, are not cool-headed enough to rationally pull apart their own game, or else a little bit of ego creeps in and they don't like being told that they're doing such and such wrong. But the fact that was on the go back then under Pillar's time certainly should add to his reputation as someone who developed that squad.
If we're to jump ahead to Dublin Donegal in Cavan this weekend, Saturday night, 7:15. It's the first time Dublin apparently now have played 5 away games in succession between league and championship since 1990. And the last time this happened, Dublin lost to Donegal. Declan Bonner played in that game and scored 3 points for himself as well. Is this a game you were looking forward to? You mean you didn't seem to be looking forward to it last week, if I remember that conversation we had. But have you changed, or maybe it was the other way around?
I'm looking forward to seeing what Dublin have, but I'm also extremely wary. Like, I mean, Donegal of all teams are unbelievably prone to just putting out a wildly experimental team. I remember Rory Gallagher got to a Division 1 semi-final, and I forget, was it 2015 or 2016 against Galway, and he went completely man for man. And I mean, it was a 3-man full forward line and they all played in that position. That's because I think a fortnight later they were out in the championship with a preliminary match. It might have been 2015 against Tyrone, actually, come to think of it. So they were out then 2 weeks later in a preliminary round match against Tyrone. So he wasn't going to give Mickey Hart the skin of it to see what kind of tactical ploys he might have. And, you know, by and large, Donegal they're prone to doing that. Before him, Jim McGuinness, 2014, they had Monaghan in the Division 2 final in Croke Park, and Monaghan walked out over the top of them that day. In fact, Monaghan got a little bit cocky off the back of that because they met in the Ulster final later on, and they found a very different kind of Donegal, a couple of months later. So I think Donegal know that they're going to be facing down in Ulster in a fortnight's time. They will be looking at an Oran McNeilis, maybe, or McFadden Ferry, and saying, right, we need game time into these boys. Stephen McManaman, if he's available. We need maybe Owen or Neil McGee, who got injured in the warm-up against Armagh. Maybe need half an hour into his legs. But they're not going to be going for it. Like, if they have the game plan to beat Dublin, then they're going to be holding on to it. So it's something, but it's nothing.
Yeah, so you don't look into the idea of momentum or anything like that, because even the hurling a couple of weeks ago, I was at Wexford against Kilkenny, and I didn't believe what I saw from this Wexford team. They got bet out the gate. I think they were down 14 points at half time. Right. I don't think that's what we're going to see in the championship. I don't see Wexford winning All-Ireland, by the way, but that's not what I expect to see in the championship. So you think Donegal would be happy enough to do that? Like, last year, lost an Ulster final. Do they not need to start getting wins on the board and even believe that a victory over Dublin in the league would give you? Does that not feed in at some point?
If it was a normal league season, I would agree with you. A 7-game programme and it came in the middle of it, or wherever it came, it didn't really matter, then yes, but it's a league semi-final for a nothing final. So I think it has to be seen in that set of circumstances. Yes, momentum's great, but I think that given that Dublin have won the All-Ireland for the last 6 years, I think if a team has the game plan to beat them, and Stephen Rochford and Declan Bonner together will be thinking that they have concocted something, or at least they have the principles of what they might implement, they're not going to be showing it yet. They're not going to be doing that because, the cat will be out of the bag if there's any sort of tactical development or nous or switches or things that maybe would have caught Desi Ford or Mick Galvin or whoever off guard. Then why do it now when there's nothing at stake? So I just, not for the life of me. I don't think Dublin will experiment that much because they've got plenty of time. They've got time on their side, and they've got a deeper squad than Donegal. So, it would seem inevitable that it's a Dublin win.
So comments after coming in on Twitter from Alan Cody says Shane looks like Tommy Drum in that jersey. Yeah, maybe I do. This is the Orga Retro Dublin jersey, and you can get 15% off with the promo code OurGame if you go to orgaretro.com. So any Dub fans out there, it's worth looking into. The Tyrone against Kerry game this weekend. So Tyke Morley's going to miss that match. His one match ban was upheld following the red card against Roscommon. And I think on second viewing, most of us kind of felt that it wasn't a red card. Are you surprised that was upheld?
Yeah.
He seemed to try and get out of the way.
Well, he was, but these things are so random. The decisions that they reach are just so given to. It just seems completely on a whim. There's not a huge amount of explanation as to how they came to any conclusions. So yeah, when you take your case to a disciplinary board in the GA, you can expect absolutely nothing. Unless you've got a technicality, and that's the point of all this. Almost is to find the technicality before you actually go and say, well, let's look at the video here. Can you not see? Because that then is just open for interpretation, and I suppose those referees might hate to see their own decisions overturned. Bit of pressure then on the disciplinary bodies. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever to see it upheld.
Yeah. So Tyrone Kerry was a once great rivalry. Do you think it could be again? Do you think it's completely faded?
Apologies for scratching my eyes here. The hay fever is absolutely off the charts up north, Shane. But I was just looking at that. I was doing something on Tyrone and Kerry, and it just, obviously Kerry, in the minds of an awful lot of people in Ulster, were always up on that pedestal. By that, Kerry used to go on these Ireland-wide tours in the 80s. The great Kerry team. And my God, they played up to it too. They didn't really shy away from the fact that they were the golden generation, even while they were there, like the Ogie Moores, Mikey Sheehy's, the Spillans and Bomber and so on. And what they used to do in order to raise funds for they had pretty lavish foreign trips themselves. Now, if you look at their history of where they went after they won All-Irelands, and if they didn't even win an All-Ireland, they were going to places like South Africa, they were going right across America, they were going to South America, and so on. But one of the wheezes that they came up with to raise a few money was tours of the North, and they used to go but one of the places that they always got an enormous reception was Oma. I think they were up there twice, 3 times maybe. Just rattling buckets for sending us away on the lash, lads. And the Tyrone people were queuing up to touch the hem of this Spillane jersey and so on. And because of that, you just wonder how much that fed into a collective psyche of that 86 team when they went up. When they were so far ahead of Kerry in the first half, and then inevitably they succumbed then to the avalanche of scores. But I was just thinking about that because I was talking to Cormac McGinley, and the McGinley's brother, who was playing in that famous minor semi-final replay in Parnell Park when they beat Kerry under Mickey Hart. They got to the All-Ireland final that year. And the thing that people forget, well, number one, is that Hart used to kind of say that why not us? Like, why should a Tyrone team ever fear Kerry? So they beat Kerry that day. And quite a few of the players in that Tyrone minor team had actually played vocational schools and had played against the like of Kerry vocational schools and played against Paul Galvin, actually, and John Sugru on a particular team. Same Pat Dungannon had won a Hogan Cup. So there was a growing belief among that age group, at least, that we can actually compete and beat Kerry. So when the minors beat Kerry, then that sort of carried through with that group into Hearts senior thing. And I'm just looking here, from 03 to 08, they met 9 times in league and championship, and Tyrone, there was a draw there in 08 in the league. But Kerry only beat them once. They beat them in 2005. They beat them 2-17 to 2-8. But we all know what happened in the All-Ireland final a few months later. Like, Tyrone beat them in that. It was an astonishing record, going from a county that always sort of had your number to, it took Kerry 9 years to beat Tyrone. When they beat them in 2009, they got 2-10 Kerry's or to Tyrone's 13 points. That was the day that the Gooch had 2 goals in the first in the first half, first 13 minutes of the first half. They had 11-point second half lead at one point. After that, anyway, look, Kerry got the upper hand on them for the rest of Hearts' time in charge. Now, there was an occasional win here and there for Tyrone, but it's interesting to note that in Hearts' 17 or 18 years over Tyrone, right, Kerry and Tyrone both won 6 league games. They both won 3 championship games, and they drew 3 times. So taking a county that were from there to Kerry, who are up here, and then saying at the end of an 18-year period, we are right there. There's nothing to split the 2 counties' records. What would be alarming is post-08, Tyrone won only 3 games against Kerry, whereas Kerry won 8 with 1 draw. So in a way, again, this game means nothing, and it means quite a lot too, because Fergal Logan, I don't recall playing against Kerry in championship, but obviously Brian Dooher was very much part of that effort in 03, 05, 08. He knew Kerry inside out, and like in one of Tyrone's first league games under Mickey Hart, the 23rd of March 03, Tyrone went down there and beat Kerry 113 to 14 points, and that was seen that day then as a real springboard for the rest of that season. And I just wonder how much Logan and Dooher are watching this, looking at this coming in and saying, we didn't have a great campaign. We were beaten here. Monaghan nabbed a draw at Ryan McInnesby's point. Donegal beat us. We beat Armagh, who ran out of steam. Maybe we need a signature win against a big county like that. So, the Tyrone selection this week will be extremely interesting to see just what kind of intent they're going to bring.
But if you put it this way, it's if they had to take over from Mickey Hart in 2009, let's say after he'd won the 2008 All-Ireland, or if you're Desi Farrell taking over from Jim Gavin with the 5 in a row, then it's a very difficult situation to come in, and you probably feel that pressure where you need a few wins. Like, I would argue that Peter Keane might need this league title, to help kind of wash away some of what happened last year, albeit some people would say winning the league, then you took your eye off the ball against Cork. But either way, I think there's no real pressure on Fergal Logan and Brian Dooher, because they're coming in from a team that probably was coming up short for the last 10 or 12 years. So I don't know if they need it that badly. Like, Kerry are going to go into the Munster Championship, and Clare are a good team, but Kerry, it seems highly unlikely that Clare are going to spring a surprise there. So Kerry can probably put more focus in the league and winning league games. And I know that it takes certain sort of circumstances for there to even be a league final this year. As far as I have it, only wins for Tyrone and Dublin can guarantee a league final. Whereas, I think, like, for Kerry, if they know this is going to be their last game, they might as well go all out to win it, knowing that they mightn't get a top test from one of the better teams for a while.
And one of the things about it is Logan and Dooher, they can't afford to be blitzed here. Like, they can't really afford that so early on in their managerial stint. Is they can't have people on their back. And I'm just thinking of, like, 2014. I actually went down to Killarney to that game. Kerry 315, Tyrone 09. And Tyrone were appalling, absolutely appalling that day. James O'Donoghue had a hat-trick. He was sensational. But like that, if I'm not mistaken, that 2014 Tyrone then actually ended up being beaten in the championship by Armagh in Omagh in a round 2 qualifier. Which
I was actually at it, and Tyrone were absolutely horrific.
Well, they were bullied, weren't they? They were bullied from start to finish that day.
They were beating football. They were, done physically as well, every which way. I was shocked that Mickey Hart wasn't gone after that game.
Right. Yeah. You clearly don't know. Yeah, but they can't afford like David Clifford to score 2-7 on them. It wouldn't do any good. Like, I mean, so in some ways, like, there's been this drift towards a more attack-minded Tyrone, and all this is great chat, and all based on like 2.5 games or whatever we've seen so far, really. But I just don't see. I just see Tyrone maybe taking up a very different shape, maybe a bit more leaner, a bit more protection around the back, and no, it's going to hold an awful lot of fascination, this game.
Yeah, so there was plenty of games on this weekend. As I said, the 2 Division 1 semi-finals, Tyrone, Kerry, Donegal, Dublin. Division 2 semi-finals, Clare, Mayo, Kildare, Meath. And then the relegation playoffs at the top level, Armagh, Roscommon, Monaghan, Galway. Relegation in Division 2, Cork, Westmeath, Downleash. Now, there's a whole host of other games as well. One talking point I just want to touch on, and then you can maybe bring in any other talking point before we finish up, is the Clare Mayo game that's going ahead this weekend, the Division 2 semi-final. Owen Collins of Ballyhaunis transferred to Clare a couple of seasons ago, and is in position to play against his uncle Colin Collins, who was manager, and perhaps even Podge Collins and his other cousin Sean Collins might be playing against him. And I think he marked Keith Higgins, who's his clubmate in Ballyhaunis, in a qualifier a couple of years ago. So that's an interesting subplot. It's only league though, so obviously there won't be any blood spilled over that. But any other games, any other plot lines catching your eye before we finish up?
I suppose though the games that you're looking at, I just looking at Cavan. Does anyone think that Cavan are not going to have a little bit too much for Wicklow? I mean, they played Derry there 2 weekends ago, and from talking to people, it felt like a proper championship. Proper championship game, real intensity, and the Cavan, they're beaten by Fermanagh on the first day out. That was a huge shock, but I think that they probably have too much for them. Derry Limerick, again, you'd probably be favouring Derry, wouldn't you? Given all that has gone before.
They look really good. They look good.
Well, they look good, but they look good in Division 3. Like, let's be honest here. Like, Longford and Fermanagh, they've played so far, and then they came out the right side of a real dogfight against Cavan. But like, it is Division 3, and we have to. We will reserve judgment until we see Derry up against whoever comes out of their draw. Who have they got in the first round? Have they got the winners of What way does the draw work out? Do they have the winners of Donegal? Yeah, there's the winners of Donegal and Down. So you'd have to imagine Donegal are going to come through. Let's just see the shape of Derry in that game playing Donegal before any kind of judgments are passed. Otherwise, like, there's an interesting one, Offaly and Fermanagh, because certainly Ray McManaman has gone with an awful lot of youth, and they're very, very young. They got a real tanking against it. 5-11 Derry scored against them, but I think so much of that is down to how callow that group is, how young that is, and once it slips away, that an avalanche could happen on you. But I think, for me, at least, looking at the one has the most right on it, as far as I'm concerned, is Waterford and Antrim, and I say that in the respect of. I recall having a conversation with a backroom member of an Antrim, backroom member there a couple of years ago, and it was the first week of February. They had lost their first 2 league games, and he was talking about planning and doing what they needed to do for the championship. But just I remember thinking, like, your season's over. Like, there's absolutely no point you competing or doing a pile of training here, but you're not going to get out of Division 4. You have nothing to aim for. And Antrim have Armagh. They've drawn Armagh in the championship. It's this is it. Like, this is it, and it's the first year for Andy McGinley, Stephen O'Neill. They would have put plenty into it, but they came out the right side by 1 point, wasn't it, to Louth and Sligo, and Leitrim was only 1 point as well. Actually, 3 1-point wins. That's pretty sensational. And Waterford only had 1 win themselves. So they've had to do an awful lot more to get there than what Waterford did. Waterford beat Wexford by a point, which probably was a surprise to many. But then Wexford were very poor. This is it though. Like, if Andy McGinley can steer them to a win at the weekend, and is it not absolutely bonkers that it's at quarter past 12 on a Saturday, isn't it?
It let me just check there. It is actually, yeah. Geez, that's some spin.
There's
an early game.
It's a ridiculous drive down to Waterford and then expect them out that early in the day. But I don't know. They didn't exactly cover themselves in glory last year when they refused to come up north to play Antrim. So there'll be a little bit of...
There might be needle there, yeah.
Yeah.
And when there's something at stake, I mean, like you've already mentioned, like the teams that are in Division 3 and Division 4, in a lot of cases, it's more important than the summer for them. So I'm sure many of those teams are furious that it's a truncated league this year. And even my own Tipperary travelling up to Longford to play a relegation playoff in Division 3, like that's a huge game for Tipperary. On the back of winning Munster last year, to think now that you could have, another relegation league and go all the way down to Division 4, even though you've got a pretty good quality of player. Now, some people would say, look at the scoreline in the All-Ireland semi-final against Mayo last year. Fine, but there's good players there. But, there's no Philip Austin anymore. Colin O'Riordan isn't there. There's a couple of injuries. Now, they're starting to come back. But the performance that Tipperary had coming up to this, I mean, weren't exactly pulling up trees in the games against Offaly, Limerick and Wicklow. So it's an important game for David Power. And it just wouldn't be a good way to start off your season where you're hoping that somehow you can put up a good defence of your Munster title. But to get relegated just wouldn't be a nice start.
But everything is high stakes this year, isn't it? That you have such little games to prepare for, such little time to prepare for them within, and yet everything's on the line. And there's just so many games that there's so much riding on them. I mean, every team in the league is in action again in some playoff form.
Will Pádraig Joyce be putting a bit of needle into his players going away to Monaghan? Obviously, he was quite disappointed that they didn't get the home venue, seeing as Monaghan had broken the COVID training ban.
It's an interesting one, but it is I couldn't tell you what is going to happen in that game, but he has a point, and it's indisputable. Why should Monaghan be granted that advantage? And it is an advantage. So I mean, what do you say really after that is these decisions are always, it's the same for other counties that have done this. It's just not very fair. Why did they not just say at the time when the draw was made, well, hold on here, Donegal and Dublin are playing in a neutral venue. Why did they not just insist on that? I may be missing something here.
And then Armagh Roscommon, you did a piece this week, I believe, in the Independent saying, does the GA need the anthem, a 32-county ideal, and would getting rid of them attract more Protestants?
Yeah, I didn't know it was in the Independent, but that's
or maybe it wasn't Independent, maybe it was in another. I had a lad do some research for me, and it just lifted out that quote, so I'm not sure exactly where you wrote it.
Yeah, no, look, I'd probably migrated from one paper to another, but
okay.
Yeah, well, it's just something that sort of, I don't know if you want to get into it right now because it's probably worthy of a proper full-blooded discussion with the ability to explore different things like that. But it just comes from my own personal experiences, and it was something Oisin McConville had mentioned on Radio Ulster last week, and I just wonder, before National League games, people get up for national anthem and so on, and I'm not so sure that it's required there, but even from talking to Protestants that I would have played Gaelic games with in the past, and they have absolutely no idea about what is in the basic games association, that chapter 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 about the 32 county identity and so on. They have absolutely no idea, but nobody else has. I mean, and by that I mean nobody else has, apart from GA journalists, complete nerds, and a few others. Like, how many people would have a knowledge of the official guide and what's in the opening pages about that, about strengthening making claim to your national territory and so on? I don't know if anybody much knows about that, and I would say that very few care about it. It's not a topic of conversation. Politics is not talked about. Religion is certainly not talked about in dressing rooms. And if people are serious about trying to attract more Protestants into the game, with it, you have to remember too that a lot of the outrage is caused is by people who simply will not be going in anyway. It wouldn't matter if you didn't have the soldier song around the vein. It wouldn't matter if you had tricolours. They'll just not be going anyway. But in the meantime, they're just going to complain and whinge about that kind of thing. And you can ask, well, the Ulster Council have made efforts. There's things like a game of three halves where they mix soccer, rugby and Gaelic and so on. And they have, done a fair bit of, political outreach and invited politicians of every shade to games and so on. But I think that eventually, if it's more integrated education, you get more coaches in. But the point I make about that too is, despite Pat Gilroy talking about Tyrone's incredible coaching structures, Tyrone have something, and I'm open to correction, but they have either 3 or 4 coaches in the entire schools in Tyrone. So, I mean, they need to sort out getting coaches into the like of the places like Carrickmore and Cullisland and so on before they need to work out then how to do a wee bit more outreach. That needs to happen for them. But it's an interesting one, and somebody told me the other day that 300 Facebook comments in the Belfast Telegraph, so I'll not be looking at that. Like.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely a topic that could run and run. And if anyone wants to get their comments in, do, and we might come to them in the next show. Look, Declan Bogue, thank you very much. We had Pillar Caffrey on earlier as well. Great show. So thanks very much, Declan.
Thank you, Shane. Take care.